Ohio State picked up a big win on the recruiting trail on Saturday as Javon McFadden picked the Buckeyes. They may be in line to add another one this Saturday with Phillip Bell's decision. And in between then and now, we're going to be back in Ohio Stadium with recruits visiting the Buckeyes, and all is right in the world. He's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. This is Talking Stuff. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on another episode of the show. We're not going to do this every 5 days, but Wednesday night seemed like a good time for us to get this recorded. And so throughout the football season, that's going to be our aim, is to record Talking Stuff on Wednesday night. Sometimes that means it will be published on Wednesday night. Sometimes it means it will be published Thursday morning. But either way, that's what works for the schedule for myself and for Andrew. And so that's what we're going to try to do. Andrew, thank you for taking time. I'm glad you're here. Hey, no problem. Nowhere else I'd rather be. Yeah, Wednesdays are pretty good for me. I know we always try to pinpoint a time, and it's never easy, but it sounds like a date to me. So let's do it. Have you seen any good movies lately? Oh, gosh. Have I seen any good movies lately? I mean, I know you saw Long Legs. I like Long Legs. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was Silence of the Lambs level good, but I liked it. It was weird, and I enjoyed it. I still need to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Haven't seen that yet. I'm going to tell you this. I saw a movie on Monday night when I was in Columbus. That's when I normally go see the movies by myself, when I'm staying at Austin's house. And I'm staying at Austin's, and so I try to get out of the house and let him and his family have time without me there. And I went and saw this movie called Strange Darling. And it was super weird and unexpected and really good. And you should see it. You would like it. I guarantee. You would like it. Andrew would like it. I don't know about the general viewing public if you would like it, but when I looked up a review of the movie, it said the less you know about this movie going into it, the better. So then I was like, okay, well, I just won't read anymore. And I liked it quite a bit. And you know what else I like? I like when Ohio State gets offensive line commitments. How about that for a segue? You like that? Javon McFadden, 4-star offensive lineman from Washington, D.C., committed to the Buckeyes on Saturday. It was not a very well-kept secret that the Buckeyes were the favorite there. We're not going to spend too much time talking about Javon, but it is a good reminder that, you know, over the course of the last 8-9 months or so, there was a couple offensive linemen that kept being mentioned as like priorities, and Javon McFadden was one of them. And so all of the hand-wringing about David Sanders in the last few weeks, I think, is fair. But I don't want, or I don't think people should gloss over what landing Javon McFadden means for Ohio State, because just put on the tape. The kid's nasty, and he doesn't play against great competition, but the 6'4", 280, 285, 290 pound, you know, by the time he plays at Ohio State, you're talking 6'4", 305, 310. Like, he's a nasty offensive lineman, and that's what you need. And, you know, Ohio State goes into the DMV, wins the battle. One that they had led for pretty much the entirety of the recruitment since he visited last November. And I know that there's a lot of hand-wringing about Justin Fry in the recruiting. So, like, when there is a win, it's worth celebrating. Yeah, I mean, I'll take any offensive line win that we can get right now. But, yeah, I mean, he's been a priority guy. So, clearly they like him. Does not have a typical tackle body by any means, which is why he's projected as more of a guard. But he had a pretty good offer sheet, even if his finalists weren't like Bama, Georgia, and whatever else, but he had a pretty good list of offers, and I'm happy with it. Now try to go out and get 2 more, preferably tackles. Yeah, I mean, that's really the question, is where does Ohio State turn from here? We've already talked at length about Micah DeBose and the fact that Ohio State really does feel like they're in a position to make that interesting. You know, it has been something that no one really wanted to verbalize, but last Friday after his season opener, Tavian St. Clair was talking to some media and brought up DeBose. And so I think it's fair to at least mention that. I don't think that that's being done unless they feel like there's a reason for that optimism. But again, long way to go. Alabama's in such a unique position inside of the state of Alabama because Auburn's tearing it up in Alabama, and Alabama needs to win those battles inside of the state. And I think in a normal cycle, like I would be considering what I would assume Alabama is paying for their current offensive line commits, the group of them that they have, I wouldn't be shocked in a normal year if they were like, you know, this kid's from Ohio, there's Ohio roots, let's not play the game that hard. But because I think Kalen DeBoer needs to win in the state of Alabama, like I could see them maybe going a little bit more aggressive than they would 2 or 3 years from now when the coaches around the state trust him more and like know him better. So I think it's an interesting set of circumstances in his recruitment, but he is a 100% the guy that Ohio State has circled as like, okay, this is the one we have to go get. So we'll see how that happens. As far as other names go, and that's really the question people are going to keep having, Andrew, is like, who's the next guy? Who else? Because we've spent the last 2 months talking about how do you not have backup plans. And right now, the backup plans are going to be created over the next couple of weeks. Like, so I said it last week. I'll say it again. The quote that I've been given multiple times is everyone is being reevaluated. So Ohio State is in a position, unlike most other schools in the country, where if the Buckeyes decide to crank up the heat and go all in on anyone, there's a chance that they have to land them. So we'll find out more names over these next few weeks, but Micah DeBose is certainly the one to worry about and think about the most. And he will not be visiting this weekend. I would expect that he'll visit at some point during the season, but this weekend does start Ohio State's next round of visitors, and that is highlighted by Chris Henry Jr., the 5-star wide receiver from Mater Dei High School in California. He is probably the best receiver in the country, regardless of high school class right now. Ohio State has had him on campus, obviously, a dozen times. It's not something where this weekend is going to change his mind about anything about Ohio State, but I do think that it actually helps, Andrew, to have him coming into town, being there in the season opener, even if it gets against Akron, and looking out on the field and seeing 5-star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith starting as a true freshman in game one. Like, I'm trying to find little reasons to be optimistic about things and little things that can make a difference in a recruitment that feel like it's eventually going to all come down to who's got the most money or whatever. But there is a better relationship here with Ohio State than people want to talk about. Like, he didn't commit to Ohio State when he was a sophomore in high school just because he was like, oh, I'm going to get paid there. Like, he did it because he loves Brian Hartline. And as long as Brian Hartline and Ryan Day are at Ohio State, all the conversation about Oregon or LSU or anyone else seems like it will feel very similar to the Jeremiah Smith recruitment. And now to see the end result of the Jeremiah Smith recruitment, which is starting as a true freshman game one, like, that has to be a positive for Chris Henry.
Yeah, that certainly doesn't hurt. And I agree with you. Looking for those little things that could make a difference is great. But I really just think it's about the two very big things, and that's Ryan Day and Brian Hartline still being in Columbus by the time he's ready to enroll. And you've said all along, if they are there, that you envision him playing football in Columbus. And I'm right there with you in that belief. I've seen the Oregon talk lately. I mean, this is a kid that's going to visit Oregon, USC, Texas, probably Alabama, LSU. And coming off of every one of those visits, there's going to be good vibes from those schools, because every time a kid visits a campus, it goes well. But barring something drastic in Columbus, I don't think it's, I feel like I have less concern about this one than I did the Jeremiah Smith one, because Jeremiah Smith was a Florida kid. So, or is a Florida kid.
And I hope people like learn a lesson here from the Jeremiah Smith recruitment, not just from an Ohio State fan perspective and how to like maybe compartmentalize the feelings about all these visits happening, but from a media, from a big picture fan perspective. The way that Jeremiah Smith was used by the media and used by the national recruiting sites to like just be a clickbait machine, like, we're already seeing Chris Henry Jr. being used in a similar way. Like, it's not going to get better. Like, that is something that's only going to accelerate. Every time he makes a visit somewhere else, there's a story. Oh, is this the team that's going to flip him? Oh, how does he feel? Oh, could Chris Henry Jr. flip from Ohio State? And then it's always couched with a quote, like buried 3/4 of the way down, that says, I really love Ohio State. Everything, I'm firmly committed. I don't want to go anywhere else. Are you sure? Like, it's just so annoying. And so, like, from an Ohio State fan perspective, you just have to laugh this stuff off and understand that if Brian Hartline and Ryan Day are at Ohio State, if the offense continues to be what everyone expects it to be, and we see Jeremiah Smith going out this year and being the freak that he is going to be, like, it's going to be very hard for anybody to flip Chris Henry from Ohio State. Very hard.
Yeah, my favorite lines are the Oregon and USC has not given up on Chris Henry Jr. And it's like, well, you know, he's the best player in the country, and he's playing out on the West Coast. So why would they give up? Why would anyone give up? It's just all, I don't know. It just all seems like nonsense to me. But yes, getting him back this weekend is awesome.
Yeah, and it won't be the only time he visits this year. But again, the kid coming from California to watch Ohio State play Akron is, after spending 3 days and in town in June to camp and all that stuff, like this is not a kid. I don't believe Chris Henry wants this attention at all. Let me be very clear about that. That is not his personality. Yes, he's a wide receiver. He's got a touch of diva in him, like every high school athlete in the country does, who's being given thousands of dollars of swag from major apparel companies anytime they see him. Like, I get it, but don't worry about Chris Henry as some kid who's a flake or who's just out being an attention whore. That is not his MO. We're going to take a quick break. This show of Talking Stuff is probably going to be a little shorter than the hour-long rants that we've been doing in the last couple of weeks, but we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about a few of the other key visitors heading to town this weekend as the Buckeyes host the Akron Zips, 3:30 on CBS on Saturday. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talking Stuff, the Ohio State recruiting podcast on the podcast. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. That's Andrew Ellis. We are talking about Ohio State's season opening game against the Akron Zips. The Buckeyes hosting probably a lot of recruits. We're not going to know about all of them because that's just not the way things work these days. Kids don't really talk. They don't really come out and say, hey guys, I'm visiting here and I'd love to talk to you about it. That doesn't happen anymore. I miss the old days, but it's fine. We're moving on. The Buckeyes do have some big time visitors outside of Chris Henry. I think that we're going to start with Albert Rockhill from Akron Hoban, the Archbishop Hoban standout cornerback. He'll be in town with his father and his brother. That's a big one. I don't know when we're going to see an Albert Hill commitment to Ohio State, but like it is really hard to envision him playing anywhere else. The class of 2026 at Akron Hoban has a couple really good players, and Albert will be there this weekend. I think this will be like his 35th visit to Ohio State over the last 2 years. It's going to take a lot for someone else to take him away from the Buckeyes. Perfect slot guy for the Buckeyes defensive backfield. Chris Henry, to go back to the conversation about him, and he always says the right things. He says he's actively recruiting for Ohio State. And you'll see that this weekend when his teammate Caden Dixon-Wyatt, another high 4-star wide receiver from Mater Dei, travels with him to Columbus. This will be, I think, the third visit to Ohio State for Dixon-Wyatt. I don't know exactly where the Buckeyes are in the class of 2026 as far as their recruiting efforts at wide receiver, but this weekend with Caden Dixon-Wyatt and Jaden Ricketts, I would not be surprised if those two guys end up being the complements in the class of 2026 to Chris Henry. So like, I think it's actually a pretty interesting weekend for Brian Hartline, who has always seemed to want to get his stuff done early. And now you have an opportunity to put Chris Henry with Dixon-Wyatt and Jaden Ricketts, the local guy from Pataskala, and say, hey, we're going to let all these guys get to know each other and spend some time going through the process at Ohio State together. Chris Henry will basically be like the tour guide, I guess, in this setting, as opposed to being a guy that's actually there getting any sort of recruiting pitch or whatever. But I like the fact that they're all different guys. Chris Henry at 6'5", 200 pounds. Caden Dixon-Wyatt is more that 6'2" guy. And then you have Jaden Ricketts, who's just a speed burner, closer to 6 foot. But it's a good trio, and I think ultimately 3 guys that could end up in the class together.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even think about those being the other 2 possibilities to complement Chris Henry, but I probably should have, because Ricketts is an in-state kid. They wouldn't have offered him if they didn't want him. And then, it's just Brian Hartline, so he's capable of just about anything. Who is the Florida kid? Name's on the tip of my tongue. Florida wide receiver, 2026. There's probably multiple ones.
Yeah, Jabari Brady is the one you're referencing, I think. Jabari's from South Florida, has visited half dozen times with the South Florida Express team. Also, a guy Ohio State's very high on. We talked about it on the last show, but I mean, the reality is I think Ohio State will want to take 4 receivers every single year if you can, especially as we head into the 105 scholarship era. Like, there's no reason not to, which is why I think we'll see Ohio State take more players like Jaden Ricketts inside of the state who have some of the requisite physical skills you're looking for to be a dominant player at Columbus, but maybe are a step or two behind developmentally, but allows you the time and opportunity to bring them along. So that's why I think Ricketts is really worth paying attention to this weekend. One other guy that we're going to talk about is Nasir McCoy. He's from Buford High School in Georgia. That's the home of Edric Houston and Harry Miller, Seth McLaughlin. So it's a place that Ohio State has done pretty well. Nasir is a highly ranked 4-star safety in the class of 2026. He visited Ohio State in the spring. He visited Ohio State in June. Camped, was not, like, from my vantage point, was not the same level of player as like Braylon Womack, the 4-star safety from Mississippi who visited. I'm not sure if he's on the same level as Jaire Edwards, the 4-star safety from Baltimore, who Ohio State is very high on, but he's definitely a top 5 or 6 safety on the board for Ohio State, and a player worth knowing. He's been hurt to start this season, so the first 2 games of the year for Buford, he's missed. So, which is never something you want to see in someone's junior season. It's a pivotal time for guys to get out and really put that, the offers on tape and show people, hey, this is what I can do. But he's a guy worth paying attention to. I'm not sure that he's someone Ohio State would go like all in on right now and push hard for, with the aforementioned Edwards and Simeon Caldwell down in Jacksonville, who is like Tim Walton's nephew, and then Braylon Womack. So like those are 3 guys that I think I'd have ahead of McCoy on the safety board in 2026. And then I'd also think people need to take a good long look at Caden Gephardt at Olentangy. He's another guy in Ohio that I think is worth paying attention to. He will not visit this weekend. I think he's going to see Penn State and West Virginia, is what he told me. So that's a guy that's certainly worth paying attention to. However, Andrew, we started a thread on the ohiostate.rivals.com message board about the season visitors. That will be updated as we learn more throughout the week. One name I do want to mention that is not on this graphic is Michigan 2026 linebacker Nate Gersh, who I thought was really, really good when he camped at Ohio State this summer. And he has not earned an offer yet from the Buckeyes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he walks away with one this weekend. And 2 names that I saw listed, but I have not been able to get confirmed for Ohio State for this weekend is Aiden and Andrew Harris, the twins from Weddington, North Carolina, the teammates of Trajan Odom. Those guys, it told me that like it's a possibility they visit this weekend, but it has not been confirmed. And I bring them up simply because we've seen a rush of crystal balls and predictions of Aiden Harris to Ohio State this week. And it's if they do show up, like I don't really have anyone, even like Jaden Ricketts, I wouldn't have like on full bore like commit watch this weekend. But that one, I guess, is one that would be worth watching if he ended up making the visit.
I saw all those crystal balls, and I totally forgot that he has a twin or whatever. Is it one of those situations where one is just ranked way higher than the other, but both have offers and Ohio State would take them both? Or do you have to take both to even get one of them? Or do you have any idea what's going on there?
In my research, it's pretty clear they would like to play together in college. I would couch it similarly to the Deontay and Devontae Armstrong situation. Like Deontay Armstrong was probably a better prospect in high school, but that doesn't mean Devontae was a stretch or like a consolation offer. It's like, hey, he still got the exact frame we're looking for. I think Deontay was just a touch more athletic. I would think that that's similar. Sam Spiegelman, a good friend of mine who covers the Southeast for Rivals.com, saw this group against David Sanders and Providence Day last week in their season opener in person. And, that's a defensive line that has Andrew Harris and Aiden Harris and Trajan Odom. And Sam's feedback to me was that he thought Aiden Harris was the best of the group. So that, that's something to pay attention to. Again, that visit has not been confirmed, but if it does happen, then all of a sudden the commitment watch stuff goes up a little bit. And all the visitors we've got listed here right now, again, Chris Henry, Albert Hill, Caden Dixon Wyatt, Nasir McCoy, and Jaden Ricketts are all class of 2026 prospects. I'm not listing any 2025s because I expect Tavian St. Clair, Eli Lee, Bod Penn Miller, Jake Cook. Those 4 commits at least will be at every home game. So it's sort of irrelevant to put them on here. But obviously they'll be in town. And so, going back to Chris Henry, like having Tavian St. Clair there to recruit Caden Dixon Wyatt and Jaden Ricketts, I think is very important. So, anybody else that you have seen or that we need to talk about from this weekend's potential visitors?
No, but I was going to ask you a quick question on Elbert Hill. I have long assumed that he was a virtual lock to end up in the class, whether it's next week or next month or next year. In part because he's from Ohio, and obviously Tim Walton is really good at what he does. Is there like any other school that we would even like have on? I don't want to say concern. Is there even a number 2? I guess right there, or is it?
I mean, there's always a number 2 because there has to be, right? So, yeah. The school that has seemed to generate the most non-Ohio State buzz is Oregon from the visits that he's been to. It's really far away. I'd have a tough time seeing that happening, but we obviously are living in a world where things are more likely than they used to be, even if they're not very likely. So that's really the key visitors for the weekend. That list, again, folks, may change. If you're a subscriber at ohiostate.rivals.com, there is a thread over there on that message board. You can check that out. That'll be updated weekly, daily, by the minute as these visits get rooted out. And if you're a subtext subscriber, I'll do my best to keep you updated on that. If you're not, 614-662-4509, you can use a 2 free week trial to talk to myself, Austin, Bill, Doug, as we go through the week of Ohio State football. We're going to take our final break of the show, and we'll be right back to talk about a little bit more stuff. Welcome back again to Talking Stuff. Andrew Ellis over there. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. We are talking about Ohio State football recruiting because that's what people love to talk about. As mentioned at the top, Ohio State got a commitment last Saturday. They're in line, I think, to get one this Saturday from Phillip Bell, 4-star wide receiver from Mission Viejo in California. And I think, Andrew, the thing that pisses me off the most about the recruiting industry, there's 2 things that I just freaking can't stand. And I think it's so pitiful in my mind. A, the crystal ball predictions. I hate them. I think they're awful. I think kids hate them. I understand why they're done, because I realize it generates a crap ton of clicks and views for the agencies and the networks who do them. So I guess I get it. It seems like a necessary evil at this point. I don't think you can put that cat back in the bag. The thing that I despise the most is when a player is deciding between a couple schools, and towards the end of the recruitment, one of the 2 schools that was considered a finalist just decides, like, we're going to start doing and saying whatever we can to make people know that A, we didn't win this recruitment, and B, it was our decision not to win the recruitment. Like, and to be honest, I'm guilty of it as well. I've done it at times because we are all in the business of context clues and, trying to contextualize teenagers' decisions. USC has recruited Phillip Bell for a long time. And now we've seen Wednesday, reports about, oh, well, he's not actually good enough to play at USC. He's not a take. We're going to take this other 3-star that no one's offered instead. Like, it just seems pathetic to me, to be honest. And I think that there's even a difference in having that conversation after a decision is made and announced than having it 3 days beforehand in order to essentially ruin a kid's announcement. It really bothers me. Am I just being sensitive? Yeah. Last time we did Talking Stuff, it was like 1:15 in the morning, remember? And I started to get really emotional toward the end. And
I do.
I'm not in that place right now, but I do think that this is something that is kind of annoying in the recruiting business. Like, we don't need to do this to kids. Like, let them have their moment. And then if you want to come back out 2 days later and say, hey, by the way, maybe they weren't sold on him. Maybe they didn't like personality. Maybe there was another kid that they thought is a sleeper. Fine, go ahead. But like, you don't have to do it 72 hours before a kid makes an announcement.
Yeah, it's weird. Probably unprofessional too, I would say. I did see couple crystal ball or RPM picks come in for some athlete that USC is recruiting, who I guess is being recruited as a receiver, and then some talk on Twitter about them wanting him more than Phillip Bell. And as you said, it's just funny how that works here with his commitment coming up. But I'm with you on all that stuff. I pay attention to the crystal ball stuff. I don't know if you remember, like 8 years ago when I had a crystal ball on 24/7 Sports, and
I do.
I kept getting like information from you and Bill Green about like which local kids were going to like Western Michigan or Buffalo, and I would be the only person that would put the picks in. And then like 6 months later, I had the number one ranked crystal ball on the page, and they got so mad they took it away from me. So that was
I remember I used to have one too, though I never worked for 247. They used to allow non-247 employees to have one as long as they were people in the recruiting space. And I lost mine, and I assume it seemed to be too much of a coincidence that I lost it when I did, for it not to be directly correlated. Do you remember when Daxton Hill committed to Alabama?
Yes.
When everyone thought he was going to go to Michigan?
Yes.
And he committed to Alabama, and somebody that I knew in Oklahoma told me that day he's still going to end up at Michigan. And I put in a crystal ball to Michigan the day that he committed to Alabama, after he committed. And some folks who worked for the Michigan site thought I was trolling, and like I was attempting to be a jackass. And so they removed my crystal ball that day.
That's funny, because the first pick that I missed on there, I think I was like 50 out of 50, was a pick for Najee Harris to flip from Michigan, or from Alabama to Michigan. And some dude I know on Twitter literally sent me a photo of like a dorm room in Ann Arbor that had like the names of the kids moving in on it. And his name was on there. So I was like, hell, it seems legit. And I think it actually was legit, because I think after the fact, saw somebody else say that they were actually expecting him still. But that was the first one I missed. And shortly thereafter, my crystal ball was no longer in existence. So
yeah,
it
happens. Anyway, I'm glad I don't have one, because, and I almost never use the rivals prediction thing, the future cast. Like I hate them. The kids hate them. I think it's awful to do to kids what we're doing sometimes in this industry. But let's go back to Phillip Bell. 6'1", 200 pounds, Mission Viejo, California. He's a 4-star receiver. He is ranked pretty much in the middle. Like, he's a 4-star across the board. Every network has him as a 4-star. Every network has him somewhere between the 20th and 30th ranked receiver in the country. Like, he is not a player that, you're going to look at and be like, okay, that's a surefire, can't miss. But there's a lot to like physical schools. He's long, he's fast, he's a kid who's still growing. Great fit from a personality perspective. It'll be a shock if he doesn't pick Ohio State on Saturday. And that has only been confirmed even more by the actions on the USC beat on Wednesday. But we'll talk more about that if it occurs next week. But generally speaking, I think that people need to know a couple things. Number one, it's that the Phillip Bell commitment does not necessarily mean Ohio State is done at the receiver position. There is still Preston Bowman out there at Pickerington North, and of course Jerome Miles at Canyon Corner in Draper, Utah, who are on the board. And the Buckeyes would take either one of those guys to be a further complement to the receiver room. So we don't know. I don't think there's a time yet that's been announced for Phillip's decision. I would assume, based on the fact that he's doing it on Saturday, it's his mother's birthday, there's no time for it. He's doing it on a yacht out in California. So my guess would be sometime around the start of the Ohio State game or in the middle of the Ohio State game. So I guess keep your eyes peeled.
Question on that one. We may have talked about it before, but you know how the rankings come out absurdly early these days. So it probably was like three years ago. I want to say he came out as a 5-star, like right off the bat as like a freshman or whatever. Obviously those rankings change all the time, and he's gone down a bit. Was there an injury? I know he changed schools at one point. Was there an injury involved, or he was one of the top performers at a couple different camps I remember reading? But what's happened over the last few years?
I just think that he's a kid who didn't get bigger and didn't really, you're out in California, you're playing against some really good players. Sometimes that doesn't always show up on tape, that you're winning a lot of those battles. He's not at Mater Dei or St. John Bosco or one of those powerhouse schools, so his team isn't quite as good. But I mean, if I go back, he was initially in the first rankings of the 2026 class when 247, his initial composite ranking on April 3rd of 2023, he was the number 12 player in the country. So he has certainly dropped some, but it is what it is. I mean, other players improve, and I can't say what goes into the rankings all the time because I don't know. But if you put on the tape and if you watch him, he's dropped from a 98. Well, I don't know how they do their rankings. 0.9827 prospect to a 0.9290 prospect. I don't. So he's lost 6 points in that time. Again, I don't know exactly what that means. But let's see. I'm going to read this scouting report from Greg Biggins, the West Coast analyst for 247, who is one of the better guys in the country as far as evaluation and really dominates the West Coast. Looked very good at multiple offseason events. Athletic, 6'2" and 195 frame. Excellent ball skills, high level body control. More quick than fast, but is extremely good route runner and easy to get separation downfield. Runs well after catch. I mean, there's nothing that you're going to see that's negative. He's like an 11.8 guy in the 100. Okay, so he's not a speed burner, but Brian Hartline has always said and harps pretty firmly that he's not looking for fast. Like, he's looking for guys who can play fast, not run fast. So if you're a 10-4 guy in the 100, that's great. But if you have to slow down to run routes or slow down to catch a ball, then it doesn't matter how fast you are in those moments. So Phillip Bell put on the tape, like he's a Brian Hartline type of receiver. And I think people, provided he commits to Ohio State, will really love what they see.
He's also a quieter kid. He's not out there talking as much as like a DeCorian Moore or somebody like that. And I love DeCorian Moore. He's the best wide receiver in the country. But, I think sometimes the lack of talk sometimes leads to the lack of buzz, maybe a little bit too. I don't know. Well,
if you look at, one thing Phillip Bell has been is productive. As a freshman at Sacramento Christian Brothers High School, he had 56 catches for 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. As a sophomore, he caught 73 balls for 818 yards and 20 touchdowns. And then he transferred to Mission Viejo to play in better competition and caught 56 balls for 644 yards and 7 touchdowns. So, he's been productive everywhere he's gone. And I don't know about the level of competition. I know, in California, they won a CIF Division I AA title. So, it's obviously plays for a pretty good team. But, a lot of times when you do evaluations of kids like this, you're looking for that. What Ryan Day always talks about is an exceptional trait. And I don't know that Phillip Bell, when you look at him, is going to have one thing that you're like, that's freaky. But he's very solid and one of the top 20 receivers in the country. And that's, it's pretty good. Moving on, let's talk about other stuff. Running back. I've said for months now, I think Ohio State would like to have 3 running backs in the class of 2025. One of those guys could be a transfer portal guy as opposed to a third prep guy. And from talking to people around the program this week, I'm leaning a little bit more toward Ohio State going out and getting a veteran in the transfer portal as opposed to leaning for a third guy like Alabama commit Turbo Rogers, who has been talked about a lot. And I think he will probably still make an official visit to Ohio State. But I would not be surprised if at some point the decision is made to say, hey, we're going to go after a veteran. And part of the reason that I think that's happening is because James Peoples is going to be, and this is just straight from someone's mouth this week, James Peoples is going to be a great one. And so you don't go into next season feeling like there's anything you're missing other than maybe some experience and somebody that can spell James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon. So that's also still where the Preston Bowman conversation can be applied. I think that his versatility makes him a player more likely to end up in this class than Turbo Rogers, and which is where I think you could see Ohio State potentially, and this is major, like hypothetical, I think you could still see them land Phillip Bell, Jerome Miles, and Preston Bowman in that scenario, if Preston Bowman is open to the idea of being more of a Swiss Army knife type player. But Andrew, there's nothing I love more than poo-pooing people's optimism, right? So I would say if you're thinking about Turbo Rogers as like a guy who Ohio State could realistically go out and get, I think they could. I think that there maybe is some decision making going on that says, hey, maybe we don't need to. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I guess I get it. You've got 4 now on the roster, depth chart, whatever. 2 of those guys are going to be going to the NFL. I would personally prefer they have 5 next year. Obviously, 2 of those being Sam Williams-Dixon and James Peoples, who I love both those guys.
Yeah.
You've got 2 committed in the class. However you get that potential number 5 guy, whether it's a Turbo Rogers or whether it's a portal guy, I guess just go out and do it. But in my opinion, if you can get Turbo Rogers, go get Turbo Rogers.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the conversation we're always going to have. Like, is it worth going out and just saying we're going to get every great kid we can across the country and we don't care about the rest of the roster? We're going to go out and find a way. Like, they have that Rashad Cisse, who's a walk-on that they really like. Obviously, they still have TC Caffey, who will be returning, who, I think there was a plan to put him on scholarship this year until, he might even be on scholarship even after the torn ACL. I think that there's a argument to be made that almost at every position now, like corner, for example, like if you bring in Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offord, do you really need a third prep guy, or does it make more sense to find a stabilizing force from the transfer portal as the third guy, is someone that's played football, that understands what college is about? And I think that we're going to see the roster break down differently when we go to this 105 scholarship thing. And I think every 3 guys you bring in at a position, you need a transfer portal guy. And so, obviously the running back might be a little different just because there's one guy playing in one ball, but Turbo Rogers, like I said, I think he'll still visit. I think Ohio State will still bring him up to get a better sense of, hey, is this where we want to go? But I think what you're seeing and what's emerging with James Peoples, who is absolutely blowing people's minds at Ohio State, like, I think that the conversation has changed. And now maybe it makes more sense to find someone that's going to be a veteran who can help guide him along, as opposed to just adding another young guy and forcing him to be the leader of the group, and not while he's, heading into his second season.
God, I hope these first 3 games of the season that they let, and you guys have talked about this on some of the daily stuff, that they let those guys do some stuff in the 3rd and 4th quarters when it's 40-0. Like, I want to see, people hate these games a lot of times. Like, my friends, they all hate these games. I like these games because I like seeing the 3rd and the 4th quarter if they're using the younger guys and whatnot. But if they're just like coming in and kneeling it for 40 minutes, like, I don't, just please let James Peoples run the football for the next few weeks.
Austin and I talked about that on the Thursday morning podcast daily. We were talking about players we want to see that are not starters, but players we want to see get a lot of running time on Saturday. And that was the main point. Like, if you're going to bring in these dudes to play, you're going to pay Akron $1.5-2 million to get their butts kicked. Like, let them get their butts kicked and play the guys that you have on your team. I think, though, for a guy like James Peoples, like, I think that argument even extends beyond when you're up 40-50-0. I think that there's no reason you can't play him in the second quarter when it's 21-0. Like, get him out there and let's see what the kids can do. Anyway, that's the conversation about running back. We can go into that further. Andrew, what's your score prediction for Saturday? Ohio State, Akron, 3:30 CBS.
My score prediction is 56-0.
56-0.
Yes.
I saw and this isn't a gambling show. I saw it was only like +1. I saw somewhere it was like only like +140 for Ohio State to get a shutout on Saturday. I'm like, man, that's kind of rough.
Yeah,
shutouts are hard. Shutouts are hard, man. We're going to move on. 4-minute offense. Andrew, what do you got? We said this was going to be a 30-minute show. We're at 40-some minutes right now. What is on your mind before we wrap up this episode of Talking Stuff and we head into the college football weekend?
Just two quick things. One 2025 related, and then one 2027. Ohio State defensive line commit London Merritt, IMG Academy, is visiting for the Florida Miami game. I can't believe where it's at. I think it's at the Swamp. But
yeah, that's where. So there's a crap ton of kids going to Florida this weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's just local kid going to the game? He's visited North Carolina too. I don't have alarm bells going off or anything, but I wanted to make sure that I should not have those alarm bells.
Yeah, there's no alarm bells. It's a game that's going to be a really great game. Everyone in the state of Florida is looking for somewhere to go visit this weekend, and it's the closest one for him at IMG to get to. It should be a banger. I think that game should almost be like college football Survivor, and whichever team loses, their head coach should be fired immediately. And I think that's probably the best way to go. I think if we designated like 2 or 3 games every weekend, where like if you lose, you're fired, I think that'd be kind of awesome. And I think for Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal, who both go into this year with a lot of expectations, maybe Florida unfairly because their schedule is pretty rough and their team is also. I think that like it would be a fun way to, like if you lose, you're just not allowed back on the team bus.
Yeah, I can get behind that idea. I'm not very excited about that game. I don't know. Like I used to love the Miami and Florida State games. Like I remember seeing Roscoe Parrish get killed in the rain and then him falling and Sean Taylor just out there doing his thing. Like I don't know. This one doesn't excite me too much. I'm not a big Cam Ward guy. Never really cared for him. I can't remember who's Florida's quarterback. I would like to see. Come on. Does that give anybody excitement? Graham Mertz. I mean, play DJ Legway. I'd love to see that.
I told people Graham Mertz was like Ryan Day's favorite quarterback in his recruiting class at points.
And then he had his first game against Wisconsin or against Illinois or whatever, that COVID game where he was like nearly perfect. And then since then it's been just like blah. So
yeah, it was Graham Mertz and Bo Nix, and like those were the guys that Ryan Day really loved in that class of 2019. More so, I mean, that was Spencer Rattler, Ryan Helinski, like Talia Tagovailoa. Like it was not a great class, but I think Graham Mertz has gotten pretty okay. Gotten a lot better. So anyway, 2027. Let me guess quarterback.
Yeah,
Brady Edmonds.
Yeah. So 2026 quarter. I mean, 2026 is still like whatever. I have no idea. But now the Brady Edmonds crystal balls are coming in. You told us about this months back that he's probably going to be the guy. You wrote about him this week. Timeline. Sometime this fall. Could it be next week? I mean, what do we think?
I would be shocked if it's next week. I think that Brady is going to the Texas-Georgia game on October 19th. And that's the one visit where I think it could like change the tenor of this recruitment a little bit. Texas has done a great job with quarterbacks. Obviously, there's the idea of going after Diabell and Arch and those guys like is probably pretty interesting, but Diabell's already committed in 26. And if Ohio State is taking it slow in 26 and maybe I'm not going to say skipping that year because they will find someone in the class. I think that the Buckeyes have it set up in a way that it will be hard for them to lose that based on just the family ties to Ohio, how much the kid loves the Buckeyes growing up. He's a huge Ohio State fan. He'll visit the week after that Texas-Georgia game, so he'll be in town for the Nebraska game on the 26th of October. He told me that he could make a decision by the end of his sophomore season. That sort of all lines up with that weekend. So we'll see. I personally, I don't like when quarterbacks commit this early, but I understand from an Ohio State perspective, like if he wants in, they're going to say yes. He's unequivocally the best they've seen at that position this summer. And I think I mean that in the 26 or 27 class. So I think that they would feel comfortable making that move. But I would not expect that to happen anytime before he makes that game day visit with his family in October.
Right.
Really good player, though. 6'5", 200 pounds. Like as a sophomore, he's got all the things you're looking for. I think like from Ohio State, like has been burned in the last decade by taking guys way too early at quarterback. And
really though, I mean, have they?
I mean, it's always worked out. It's always worked out because they've been able to pivot to someone else. But the guys that they've taken early, it's very rarely worked out with those dudes. Like, so it's they've been able to pivot, and that's a testament to Ryan Day's ability to like read the room. But they have. Let's go back to Danny Clark, Jack Miller, Dwan Mathis, like Quinn Ewers, like
the kid that ended up Tristan Wallace,
Dylan Raiola, Tristan Wallace. Like, it's not been like, hey, you take guys early, that's fine. But
yeah,
I think you'd rather wait till a kid has played his junior year of high school football, and no position more that you'd wish that for than quarterback. And I think if Ohio State had their druthers, like, they would never pick a quarterback until the guy's senior year. But that's just not the way. That's not real life. So
yeah, with the way the quarterback dominoes fall, you can't do that. Sorry, go ahead.
You can't wait that long. What's real life is when you have to say goodbye to people that you care about.
That's true. Wow,
and
you're getting deep now. It's late again.
Yeah, it's time for us to say goodbye to people we care about, and that's you, America. We really appreciate you being here. We know you could be other places, but you're not. Thank you. Talking stuff is over. College football is back Thursday night. We got a couple banger games. Should be a great weekend in Columbus as Ohio State hosts Akron, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on CBS. A lot of recruits coming to town. A lot of conversation about recruits will happen after that as we get to our next episode of Talking Stuff sometime middle of next week. Again, we're aiming Wednesday. Thanks for being here in all sincerity. It truly means a lot. He's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.